What's the deal with this octagon-looking thing on your wrist?
This is the World Championship watch that O'Malley got. He has to be 135.0, and that is my job.
Cutting weight for an event is really, really challenging.
You can drain weight out of a muscle way more than you can drain weight out of fat. Pull back, bye!
Switching stances.
That's a wrap, son.
Was the switching stances, was that part of everything right there?
There's a video of him doing that exact counter backstage before the fights.
Did you work with him on his breathing at all through the years?
That shallow mouth breathing, that's very sympathetic. It sets your physiology up to control your psychology.
Say a UFC decide we believe that these athletes should be able to utilize some HRT, some TRT, and they task you with making sure everyone's healthy. How would you do that? Do you have that shit again?
And Nsima comes back, like, he runs to the bathroom. He's like, what do you guys what? Like, yeah. What are you guys smiling about?
He either just had like a little bit of poop on his hand or he had to wipe one extra time.
Comes back like it's our fault. Like, what?
Blame it on us.
Laugh at me one more time, man. I swear.
I mean, do you want to explain what happened? Or just
dead air. Yeah.
Nothing. It was just a mystery. I had to go to the bathroom and check something.
Comes back and laugh at me again. Aggressive.
Oh, great way to start the pod.
So a toboggan.
Right.
There was some controversy.
There was.
I think we need to clear this up. Andrew, can you look up a toboggan?
Yeah, sure thing.
A toboggan is a sled. It's not
a hat.
how Canadians say hat.
It's a hat.
It's not. Canadians do not say toboggan for hat, and we don't have like the heads like on South Park.
Hey, you're not.
Okay. This is
And the
fake
beady little
news.
eyes.
These aren't real things.
You are not in Canada anymore.
Yeah.
You are in the United States of America.
Why isn't it just called a sled then?
And we will
A
ship you
sled
the-
is a sled. A toboggan is a sled, and a toque is a hat. Look at all
That's
those
a really
sleds.
tall hat.
That's it.
Look at all those
You'll
sleds.
see. You'll see.
No.
You'll see.
Look at all those curved sleds, which are exactly what a toboggan is.
So where did you get the idea that it's toboggan?
No, look it up further. Keep looking.
Just keep looking.
Just type in toboggan hat then. Like, see, let's see if that
Yeah.
like gives us something.
No, because that's going to be a brand.
No, it's not a brand. There you go. There's tons of toboggan hats.
Toboggans.
Well, if you type in...
Well, it's a winter hat, motherfucker.
Yeah, but you can type in anything. Type in scissors hat. Type in... The hats are going to... Images are going to come up if you type in
Scissors
hat.
hats. That's probably a nice hat.
Oh, look at all the scissors hats.
Oh, wow.
Holy shit. A whole country must call scissors hats.
What does
Maybe.
Wikipedia
Just
have
because you're
to
from
say about
Canada
it?
doesn't mean you know what a hat means.
What the fuck?
In Canadian.
He is a high-level coach, though, and that might mean something.
This is nationalism. I don't like this. I am allowed to be here.
Barely.
The most stereotypical thing. I went out for lunch yesterday. And she's like, "Where are you from?" I said, "Canada." And she's like, "Oh, my friend's there. She got maple syrup." And I was like, "I'm supposed to be like, oh my god, you understand me? Yeah, thank you. That is our culture."
What do you think is your culture? Like, what would be the thing that like is like Canada, very Canadian?
We say sorry a lot.
Yeah, Surrey. Yeah.
Surrey?
Yeah.
Okay.
We say sorry a lot.
Play hockey.
Hockey is culture.
Yeah.
High sports.
Yeah. In the same way that like high school football, like whoever's the captain of the high school football team, like that kind of is huge here. That's like the complete opposite for hockey in Canada. So hockey is definitely culture there.
Seems like that's where you guys let your anger out too.
Yeah.
Because like they're known as being nice people, but you'll fuck each other up on a hockey.
Hockey's very violent.
Yeah.
If you get in a fist fight, a bare knuckle fist fight, you go sit down for 5 minutes, and then you're allowed to come back out again.
It's so weird, right?
It's the greatest thing of all time.
The goons.
Yeah.
Each team has a couple of guys that like just know how to fight mainly.
Yeah, and you can just go out there and just drop your gloves and fight somebody.
Is it still like the same like nowadays versus the way it used to be? Or, like they still do that?
Oh, there's definitely still goons. There's definitely still a checklist. Like if you went after a star player in a dirty way 10 games ago, that goon hasn't forgot. And then he's going to check you the next time. There's checks and balances. That's how the goon works. That's goon code.
That's amazing.
Yeah. What's the what's the reasoning why in hockey though? Like the refs are just like, oh, they're fighting. We're just gonna let them like. I don't understand it. Like, why do they just let them fight and then get it out? It's a really cool approach.
It's very American.
It's just not done in any other sport where they're like, all right, guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I know.
You lost. Hey, come on, guys, let's go. Like, what?
And who goes to the penalty box? Both guys or the guy that lost?
Yeah.
And they both do.
Yeah.
They both go sit down for 5 minutes and then that's it.
That's kind of amazing too. Now the game's played with 4 people on the ice rather than 5 or whatever.
And they just get to go rest. That's your penalty is to go sit down and chill.
The penalty box.
Yeah.
You ever seen when the fight carries over into the penalty box? That's pretty good.
Or into the crowd.
Yeah, it
that's even
carries over.
better.
Yeah,
and then there's
people
bench
get out.
clearing brawls.
Do they put the penalty boxes next to each other too, or is that separate?
Oh yeah, you can chirp each other. It's usually penalty box, like announcer, penalty box. So you'll be
they're
leaning over,
close.
talking to each other. Yeah, yeah. When they're mic'd up, it's fantastic.
Like a dog pound. This is wild.
Yeah, 2 dogs on the other side's barking at each other. Yeah, it's
Sick.
Surprised they don't hire some MMA guys to come in.
yeah.
Yeah, you could skate well enough. You can come be on our team, just jack these people up for us every once in a while.
Be dangerous, dude. Dangerous. It would be bad news for everybody.
It seems too hard. It seems like too hard of a sport.
It's a very hard sport. You need every quality. You need strength, power, endurance, a lot of ankle
And
stability.
you have to skate at the same time.
So the speed of movement means the speed of thought it needs to be really fast. All of those things, and then also people are trying to kill you. So yeah, it's all of those things combined make it very cultural for Canada.
What's the deal with this octagon-looking thing on your wrist? That's an amazing-looking watch. What do you got going on with it?
Yeah, man. This watch is the World Championship watch. So this is an octagon. They don't actually make these. This is the World Championship watch that O'Malley got.
That's some Ric Flair shit right there.
Winning the title, and he gave it to me. And he gave me this chain with it. Yeah. Yeah, so I just got hooked up. But yeah.
Were you just carry weapons with you? You should.
No, I was like, people are going to think that you're a fighter and they're going to try to come test you.
Good. That's fine. No, this is dude, this is an incredible gift from him. And it's got the one red jewel in it because that's like your first win. And then there's going to be 2 jewels in the defense one, 3 in the third. So yeah, it's super, super cool having this watch. It was one of the coolest weeks of my entire life being in Boston for that win.
Yeah, what was that like watching? It's got to be nerve-wracking, watching these people that you know and care about, and you get close to them, you get close to their families, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You get close to their camps, you get close to everybody. And then you see, the person you've been working with for a long time doing a very dangerous sport. And then I'm sure it feels great sometimes when your guy comes out on top, but there's also the worry and the concern of this is a very dangerous sport.
Right. Yeah. It's I've had those kind of butterflies with a lot of my athletes because there can be tens or even $100 million on the line in those types of situations.
Just like the Boston Marathon for me.
Right. Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of dollars riding on that.
Identical.
Yeah. You can have butterflies, man, but the real key is getting those butterflies to fly in formation. I think one of the most powerful tools, having anxiety and nervousness is one of the most powerful states you could ever be in if you can also control it. So having that, it's there's a quote out there that's anxiety is like a fire, and you can either allow that fire to consume you or you can throw it at your opponent. And that's his mentality is fantastic in that regard. And yeah, him and I have been working together for about 5 years now, and 9 fights. And him and I, our journey, he was an unranked fighter when we first started working together, and now he's the world champion. So it's been an incredible journey. And that week, you got to understand, you're right, there are nerves that come from me because championship weight, he has to be 135.0. And that is my job. If we don't get there successfully and then successfully rehydrate and refuel, then that is my job. And a lot of people only ever get 1 title shot. And he's able to get that done. So there's nerves in my perspective, being there, having the diet, going to the grocery store with him, being involved in his weight cut and getting there. And then once that all goes successfully, those nerves and being around his confidence, it changes the whole energy in the room. And then it's time to rock and roll. Yeah.
When you have an athlete like this, I'm sure there's these guys are so quick. It's just absolutely ridiculous the way they're able to get up and down. And
Yeah.
Just they're so fast that even just you watching
There it is, right here. Pull back, bye.
Switching stances.
That's a wrap, son.
Was the switching stances, was that part of everything right there? Because that looked like it set everything up.
Yeah, he threw the teep and baited him in because Aljo lunges in, and then he did that pull back too. And and that was a wrap. And there's a video of him doing that exact counter backstage before the fight started because that was a part of the strategy. And it was huge. I lost my voice for like a whole week after that right hand landed, and it was huge. This guy, there's something different about a high performance mentality because Aljo is the best grappler in that division. And O'Malley had a rib injury, and he couldn't grapple for 6 weeks leading into that fight. 6 weeks. And he still shows up, nasal breathing, confident. I'm going to knock this guy out. And he's going against the greatest grappler in the division without grappling for 6 weeks. But it's almost like a blessing in disguise because it forced his camp to emphasize his strength. How are we going to use striking? How are we going to use footwork? How are we going to use movement? How are we going to bait him? Because you can spend a fight camp trying to neutralize someone else's strengths, or you can spend a fight camp emphasizing your own. And that kind of forced us in that way. And then that right hand bomb landed, and it was an incredible night.
When when you're helping these guys, like I'm sure you're taking on more and more tasks, like the more that they trust you and stuff like that. And
right.
I don't think people know, like it's not always common to take on someone's weight cut.
Right.
Like sometimes there's like a coach for this, there's a coach for like lifting,
right.
There's a coach for like nutrition, but even the weight cut thing a lot of times is like left to some other dude that just knows it really well. There's a bunch of them in the UFC.
Right.
And when you agree to something like that, I mean, I know you're super smart and you know your stuff. Are you kind of like, oh shit, I just agreed to something this is gonna be intense. This is a lot. This is hopefully I didn't bite off more than I can chew.
Bro, I love that. My job is high pressure, high reward. And I fucking love that. That's what wakes me up in the morning. That's what keeps me excited to keep reading research and keep learning more. That's like my main education now. Like the way I learn things now is not like really through certifications or anything like that. It's an athlete giving me a set of variables and context that need to be accomplished within a certain time frame. So I'm just given this case study, and then I have to figure it out. That is my job, is to figure that out. And that's how I learn things now. Is like I'll be given this context, this situation, these variables, and a timeline. And how do I get physiology to do this within that context by this date? And it takes you down an incredible journey that can keep you up at night. Like I love that. I love feeling alive that way. And a saying that I had way early in my career. So like probably 13 years ago, I would say yes to everything, figure out how to do it after. And that's actually something that I'd done for a long time. Like, yeah, I can help you out. Yeah, I can help you out.
Turn around and go, oh shit.
Dude, this is actually how I used to do more sales in the gym. This is funny. Because you have to do your own sales and personal training. And someone would be like, I always use this line. They'd be like, hey, Dan, so do you know something about the thyroid? I would always say, did someone tell you to ask me? I would always say that as if I'm already ready to rock, right? Yeah. And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm your guy. Let's go. I would do that all the time. Like,
for all you trainers, there you go. There's your fucking tip.
Well, dude, it worked because someone would say, what do you know about belly fat? What do you know about the heart health? What do you know about endurance? I would say, did someone tell you to ask for me? And they would say no. And I'd be like, oh, I'm your guy. But yeah. So, and then the ice is broken. They're laughing, and I've built trust with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, boom. I'm your guy. Yeah. So that was.
O'Malley's listening to this. He's going, oh, fuck.
She did that to me.
He's remembering.
Weight loss. I'm your guy.
Yeah. Did someone tell you to ask for me, Sean? I'm your guy. No, that was in the Gold's Gym days. That was when I was on the floor personal trainer, trying to get exposed to as many case studies as possible so I get as much experience from different angles as possible. And it worked. It worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very non-salesy way to close people very fast.
I'll go ahead and Nsima, sorry.
Let me ask you, we just had Alan Belcher on the podcast. He's the bare knuckle heavyweight champ. And he went deep into how his coach changed his breathing. When he started like implementing nasal breathing, he said that just like totally helped his endurance. He became a much calmer fighter. And you mentioned nasal breathing when you're talking about Sean.
Yeah.
Did you work with him on his breathing at all through the years? Or is that something he already did well?
It's something he already did well. He already had interest in. And he actually has a strength and conditioning coach named Brandon Harris, who's very big into breathing and breath work. And so he's worked with Sean a lot on that. But I think that it's super important to have that because that type of nasal breathing approach, it helps keep you calm. That shallow mouth breathing, that's very sympathetic, that's very activating, it's very anxiety based. And it sets your physiology up to control your psychology. Like when your physiology is doing something anxious, your psychology is going to respond. They're not two different things. That is a feedback loop. And that nasal breathing approach really helps people calm down, get out of that state of mind, and allow them to actually execute what they've been training. Like you can actually have 8 weeks of fight camp and like O'Malley right there, teep, bait, pull back, right. That combination is what essentially won him the title. But so many guys will run 8 weeks of fight camp, just work on something, and then just go back to what they're most comfortable with come time for the fight. You work on this stuff. Like I'm sure you know, in the grappling world, like there's a high pressure situation. You've been working on this one move this whole time, but then you go back to your natural instincts because you're not calm. When you're not calm, you're going to go to what's most comfortable with you. But when you have the ability to be calm, you have the ability to execute a strategy that you actually worked on that gives you a higher percentage chance of success rate, and an ability to be patient as well. Your ability to be patient and see things, that's what a flow state is. Yeah. Like that controlling of that arousal. Because if you have a very low arousal, you're not going to be able to access a high performance mindset. But if you have too much arousal, you're also going to have way too much anxiety to access that high performance mindset. But if you're right in a flow state, if you're right here, that's really where you want to be. And the development of your rituals and habits and breath work and confidence and preparation, those are all the things that are going to help you be in that flow state. And yeah, in Boston, that was a perfect representation of that.
And a heads up real quick for everybody who wasn't able to see that Alan Belcher episode. Some of you might have a deviated septum, and Alan Belcher also had a deviated septum. And it's interesting because we've had people on the podcast that have talked about it. I think Joel Jameson mentioned, he's like, I don't worry about that too much because some athletes can't do that. But Alan Belcher mentioned that like, if you have a deviated septum, you just need to breathe slower because you can open those areas up as it worked for him. So he just breathed slower, focused on nasal breathing, and it's something that made a massive difference, as you're mentioning, for his fighting.
Yeah. You're able to calm down. You're able to allocate different fuel resources for better endurance, something that you're doing for the marathon as well. That whole performance and psychology from you being able to control your breath, that's huge. But a huge part of, honestly, like aside from breath work, like is using it to calm down. I don't really rely on that, to be honest. Like when I go into a fight camp, like you said, like you build trust with people over time. Lots of times, like I'm first brought in to look at blood, and they're like, "Okay, shit. Can you also do my meal plan?" I'm like, "Yeah, 100% will." And then after that, it's like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" So like over time, I kind of become like not their one guy. Everybody has lots of coaches, but I become almost like a human performance director, to where like I've got your blood and your nutrition, but they also want me to build like how their week looks. Like if you're doing these sessions back to back, is it going to offset recovery? Like I would go in and kind of change the schedule, not what the coach is doing, but change the schedule and overall layout to make the overall volume more recoverable. And I end up doing that a lot. But like from that perspective, I kind of view performance anxiety based upon preparation. If you're a hockey player and you've got pregame anxiety and you're like, "Coach, do you have any routines for my pregame anxiety?" I get out there and I can't really perform. And I would always be pretty brutal with them. I would be like, "Okay, well, did you follow your hockey diet this week?" No. "Okay, did you do your hockey mobility this week?" Not really. "Okay, did you do your hockey training?" "Yeah, I did that." "Okay, fine, you did that." "Did you do your hockey recovery, or did you get good sleep?" Like, no. You earned anxiety. Okay. I'm sorry, but you deserve to feel how you feel right now, because you cannot expect to be confident when you're not prepared.
You're like, now you got me fucking worried too, because you're not doing the shit that I told you to do.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry, my friend, but you deserve to be anxious because you're not prepared for this day. So use anxiety. Anxiety is a state of mind designed to create an action out of you to find a state of mind that isn't anxious anymore. That's used as a fuel. Anxiety is a state of mind. That's a response to tell you that you need to change something. I think a lot of feelings are that way. Like in the same way that I can feel hunger and then I'm going to go eat. I think if you have anxiety, you need to take action to change your life. If you have emotions, are feedback, and I think emotions are messages, and stoicism is your ability to process those messages. You can use them and turn them into action points. That's somebody who's going to be way more prepared, and as a byproduct of that, they're going to be a much higher performer.
Can you be over prepared? Like, can you like dive into every tiny little thing? Like, oh, what if he does that? And then you start thinking like, oh, if he's going to, I don't know, I can't think of any fight terms or whatever, but like if he's going to throw an overhand right, I got to be prepared for that. And then you get locked into this overhand right, and then you just never see it in the fight. Like, can you make the mistake of going maybe too prepared in one specific direction?
I think so. I think that would be too much arousal. So that's
I also think that's what you were pointing out with having the guy be such a great grappler. He was limited, right? He was limited on what he could prepare for, right? So it kind of shuttled him into like thinking about less shit.
Yeah,
you know, like if you're overly concerned about maybe too many different things, then maybe it's going to be hard to make progress, right? If you're trying to be that prepared.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that's a commonality I've seen across high performers, is that they don't perform with what they wish they had. They perform with what they have. It's like, I wish I had this coach. I wish I had those genetics. I wish I had this mobility. They don't ever think about what they wish they had. They think about what they have. What does O'Malley have? He's got my striking. Like that's what he's thinking. I've got my striking. Boom. You're able to do that. And high performers, that's just the way they are. Like I work with Shea McClellan. Him and I won a Super Bowl together. He was the starting linebacker for the Patriots. He was a monster. He played both inside and outside linebacker. Like that, he was an absolute animal, and one of the most explosive people I've ever trained. I had 10 NFL and 10 NHL guys, all in an off season, all with me in Irvine, and I'm doing programming for all of these guys. And there's NHL guys there that are like 180, 190. Shea was 260, still ran the fastest, still jumped the highest out of anybody there.
What's his name?
Shea McClellan. He was an animal. And he just came from a really, really small town. And he was talking about like the ways that he trained was just like outdoors with stuff. Like just like with stuff. Like these guys, they don't perform with what they wish they had. They perform with what they had.
He's like, I thought it'd be more challenging to run if I picked up that rock over there.
Right.
So they just like do real basic stuff that's difficult, right?
Yeah. I remember talking to him. I said that it's not, there's my man right there. Yeah, he was with the Bears, and then he moved to the Patriots. And because of the coaching at the Patriots, he really shined at the Patriots compared to the Bears. And real top draft pick. He was a legend to work with, man, and an absolute animal.
He looks like he fits the mold of like a lot of the Patriot players. Like they have that same like body type.
Yep.
You see that time and time again where when they were in their prime, it like the guy looks like he could play almost any position on the field.
Right.
That's like a weird trait of like so many of the New England Patriots from the years where they were dominating.
Yeah, and he's one of the guys who could have done anything too. Like he's really good at basketball. He's really good, just one of those guys. But yeah, it wasn't what he had to work with. It's how he worked with what he had.
Yo, are those women's sandals?
Hold up. These sandals are rooted in millennia of masculinity. Pretty much all the ancient Greek warriors wore them.
Also, the ancient Aztec warriors used to wear them into battle. They're called cacti.
The Zulu warriors would march hundreds of miles in them.
And so did the Romans. They conquered a bit of land themselves.
That's great to know.
Is that the new Victoria's Secret drop?
Grab your Flex sandal now at powerproject.live.
I want to get back to the weight cut a little bit because I know like some of the people that are listening probably do jujitsu. There's probably also coaches and stuff that are probably interested. And I know sometimes, we can't give away all the secrets, but cutting weight for an event is really, really challenging, or it can be really challenging.
Yeah.
And also like, how long before the fight you weigh in and stuff like that are some of the athletes that you work with, do they sometimes weigh 10 to 12 pounds, 15 pounds more than what they weigh when they weigh in?
Or 20 plus.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a performance enhancer by itself. Like,
and then the idea and the goal, correct me if I'm wrong, is like they just dip down to that weight just for that split second that they're on the scale, and then they're right back up, right?
Right. Yeah, that's how it works, man. Like I can run you kind of through the high level strategy here. And it's funny because I did a video like with Sean on weight cutting, and then there were some comments like, "Whoa, these are secrets. I don't know if I would say something like that." Like, these aren't secrets, man. This is programming that's available like anywhere.
Yeah, some of the basics.
Right. But like from a big picture perspective, you want to get as lean as possible. That's like that. You absolutely want to be lean because the amount of water in muscle is 75% water. So you can drain weight out of a muscle way more than you can drain weight out of fat, which almost has no water in it. So the fatter you are, the harder your weight cut is because there's less areas that you can pull water from. So you want to get as lean as possible so that you're losing tissue weight rather than water weight.
And this is like, you want to get as lean as possible as early on as possible. As soon as you know that you're going to compete in X weight division,
right?
You want to start prepping for that with body composition changes, right?
Yeah, I like my guys entering camp, like to put a weird number on it. I like my guys entering camp about 80% in shape. That's where I like my guys, so that we still have linear progression the whole camp for your physiology, but also for your psychology. You're starting to look better. You're starting to feel better. You're starting to move better. You're getting in better shape. Your heart rate's lower, even with these increased conditioning sessions that we're doing. You enter camp about 80% for physiology and psychology, but also so you don't overtrain. You start camp at 100% in shape, and you've already got there. Your injury risk by the time camp is over, and your ability to overtrain, and since you're a fighter, your ability to go through overtraining just because you're so mentally resilient, even though you're physiologically breaking yourself down, it's not going to work to enter camp at 100%. So you're getting to there, and then it's the final week where a lot of these things come together. I have passive and active weight cutting strategies. If you're first passive is like how you can have weight just fall off the body. Active is when you got to do something like a sauna or a steam room or something like that. When you are doing passive strategies, about 7 to 10 days out, depending on what your weight is, you're just pulling carbs. Because a lot of people know, for every gram of glycogen stored, you're going to have 3 to 4 grams of water stored along with it.
You can write in the air if you need to. I remember last time you did a Minority Report thing.
I was telling Andrew, I was like, I'm glad I have a bottle because when I get socially awkward, I can hold on to it.
Remember he was drawing like molecules last time? He's like,
yeah. So we got pulling the glycogen out. I'm gonna get 5 to 8 pounds easy just from that, and possibly more. And we're going to pull that. And that is, I don't even have to reduce his calories. I can just swap macros, fats for carbs. And so he still has some satiating meals, but weight is falling off of him due to glycogen loss. Then we're also going to do a water loading strategy. You water load for about 3 days, and that's going to offset something known as antidiuretic hormone. And when you consume a ton of water all the time, naturally your pee frequency increases a lot. And when you do that for 3 days, you can offset antidiuretic hormone. And antidiuretic hormone is actually going to be offset for 24 hours after, even if you stop drinking water. So you can water load for 3 days and then stop drinking as much water on that 4th day. And you're still going to continue to pee as if you were drinking a lot of water. So passively, you're losing a lot of water weight, and you can also pull sodium that day.
I want to add something quickly. So people that try this, be aware. You're going to gain a lot of weight when you start drinking that much water. You're going to look at the scale and be like, these guys are wrong, man. This shit ain't going to work.
Yeah, no, that is hydration. I've talked to fighters about that a lot. I typically have them water load on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday I call whoosh day. So that's when we would pull it. And that's when they might be heavy for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But then Thursday is whoosh day, and they will lose a ton of weight on whoosh day from the sodium manipulation, from the water manipulation, from the ongoing glycogen depletion. Certain forms of fiber can be utilized to clear GI residue, which is essentially I'm just pulling all of the poo out of your body. From that perspective, you can also use laxatives during that time if you need to more. These are all different ways. Laxatives is a kind of a different one because you can offset your electrolyte status if you start pooing too much. So that's one you don't want to be too aggressive with. Miralax is actually a great option in there.
You don't want to be shitting like crazy after you weighed in either.
Right. Yeah. So you got
time it.
You got all these things taking place, and then Thursday is your whoosh day, and then on Thursday, that is like when you would do maybe some sauna work or a hot tub, something like that in the morning, and then allow also whoosh day to take place all throughout the day. And then we're also going to do another active weight cutting session at nighttime to get some more off. But the real objective here is to use as many passive strategies as possible so that you don't have to use or rely on active strategies, which those are the ones that can decrease performance more. When you're forcing something out of your body rather than doing some more intelligent scientific manipulations to hormones and stuff to passively lose weight, that's a way in which you can maintain a high level of performance. And after that active strategy, like our whole objective with this thing is for him to be on weight in as minimal time as possible. So I've actually already done the metrics as well on like their night rate weight loss. So if you typically lose 1 to 2 pounds overnight just from sleeping, I'm going to factor that in. So let's say like we want to weigh in at 135. I might have you go to bed at 140 because I know you're going to wake up at 138. And then we just do that final little 3 right before you hit the scale. Boom, hit the scale. Right after, you're going to begin rehydration and refueling for the next 24-hour period before you compete. And like O'Malley, this is something I've posted before. He's at 135 at about 9 a.m. And then that afternoon, he's 158. So going up for the ceremonial weigh-ins, up to 158. I had Bisping at 185 when he won the world title, knocking out Luke Rockhold. And that afternoon, he was already back up to 208. So yeah, so I've got these guys. I have weight cutting completely dialed in because they will put on all of that weight. There will be no diarrhea. There will not be gastrointestinal upset. That they just fill back up and come back to life. And then I'll do very subtle and like sophisticated manipulations based on their current weight and what I know about them. And we're gonna do that up until they reach their training camp weight. And then once they reach their training camp weight, then we can kind of pull on the brakes a little bit and eat like a little less frequently. Just do things for what they enjoy, what they're used to, what's going to have them good satiation. But goal is to get to training camp weight with 0 gastrointestinal distress. You can do that. That is a massive unfair advantage where you can be 20 pounds heavier than somebody.
When you hear a coach talk about weight cutting, what are the red flag practices that you're like, oh, you're doing that? You're doing that?
Yeah.
So what are those?
Weight cutting is unbelievably prehistoric in some camps. Like maybe you guys have talked to a lot of pro athletes, maybe you would believe me, but like you wouldn't believe how terrible some of these strategies still are in 2023. Like you'll have fighters just spitting in a bucket, so they just never swallow their spit. They just keep spitting in a bucket, and that is a weight cutting strategy. You'll have guys literally starve themselves when they could have been eating the whole time. Like O'Malley eats the entire fight week. He's eating even on whoosh day, the day before weigh-ins. Wow. I still have him eating 4 or 5 meals that day. That is still happening the whole way through.
Are those foods any like lighter or anything like that? Like, is there any reason to like have like a Rice Krispie treat or something, or not a Rice Krispie treat, but something super light that has some calories?
Yeah. You're gonna have we won't have Rice Krispies. We're getting carbs out of there. So, but something that is low to 0 fiber with protein and fats. That's kind of ideal that day. So it's super easily digestible. You get your calories in, you get satiation in, so you can still do your fight interviews and media without being starving and dying the entire time, and not adding any sodium or glycogen load to the day. But you can do that 4 or 5 times that day, and there's so many red flags. Like the inflammation, you'll get guys who will starve themselves, which is completely unnecessary, and then you'll also get guys who they equate hard work with losing the weight. So they're doing like a lot of these things. Inflammation causes water retention. So if you're in there doing high intensity intervals or going crazy for no reason, you are going to create inflammation. You are going to retain water. So you're doing this thing to try and lose weight, and you don't know that you're creating certain cytokine activities in the body that do the exact opposite. You're going to be retaining water. So that's another giant red flag. There's so many of these things. I would say a very common red flag, I'll say this, actually happens after weight cutting. It happens almost immediately after weight cutting. Like a lot of fighters think that you've won once you've made weight. It's like that's the celebration. So then they go eat something that they haven't eaten all fight camp. which is like the worst thing that you can do. You've worked so hard this whole fight camp, and then immediately after weigh-ins, when your gut is the most sensitive it's going to be, you go and have something that your physiology is not used to. And I have made that change for everybody, and it's something that drives me insane. Because like the day before the most important competition of your life, you're going to introduce a new variable. Why did you do that? Why did you go out for lunch at a local spot and put something in your body and then get a negative response from it? You should only ever eat what you have eaten the entire fight camp after weigh-ins. Go eat whatever you want after the fight. But after weigh-ins and before the fight, it should only be foods that you're unbelievably confident will not cause you gastrointestinal distress.
When the guys are getting their weight back on, do you have them doing some movement? Because I know like sometimes in powerlifting, when I've done bigger cuts, it seemed like if I didn't move around, like it's a weird way of saying it, but like the carbs and the water like would end up in like weird spots. So I needed to move my whole body around. I needed to like exercise my legs. I needed to exercise my arms, my shoulders to try to get everything in there evenly. It was more of a feel than a science, I guess.
No, and that is the art of coaching. And I know exactly what you mean, because when you do activity, it feels like it does go in the right spots. Like you do almost just like how it feels when you eat and then go for a 10-minute walk. How much better your digestion in the body feels. It feels like all of those things are just nicely going into the right spots and they're not sitting in your gut, and everything just feels so much better. So I'll have guys typically do like a super light, very, very light shadowboxing session, but preferably like a little walk or a bike. Because like if somebody wants to do shadowboxing, like if they do want to work on something, it's good for their confidence, then that is okay. But I always say the point of this session is to not become a better striker, because you are not going to become a better striker right now, the day before a fight, doing 20 minutes of shadowboxing. So do not go hard. Do not do high impact. Do not do a ton of bag work. Don't do any of that. What is best now is just to enhance your physiology. And you can do that on a stationary bike. You can do that on an elliptical. You can do it or walking. Anything super low impact, because the goal is not to become a better fighter, because camp is over. The goal right now is just to get those nutrients back in the right spots.
How much weight percentage-wise are you looking at to pull off of somebody, approximately?
A 10% is pretty solid. Yeah. So like if somebody weighs in, if somebody's supposed to be at 135, then 13.5 pounds above that can be pretty solid. I think that's a pretty good recommendation. As you learn your body, as you get more crafty with the science, as you know how much people can take and tolerate, you can continue to enhance that. But I think 10% of body weight is something that's very, very reasonable and doable.
Does it get to be harder over time for the guy to do the same weight cut? Or have you not really run into that?
Yeah, what I've found is that if it's a high frequency, then it gets harder. But like if you fight 2-3 times a year, then not really. But if you're a wrestler and you're cutting weight every weekend for your wrestling tournaments, that's when your body starts creating some adaptive responses to stop losing that water, and things get very difficult. And that's when it can get super unhealthy rather. But the way we do it, like you could interview Sean or Bisping or any of my other fighters, that these guys would tell you that they feel fantastic, and that they would do it every single time for the performance benefit, and it's not harder. And if anything, it might be easier because we learn them more every single time, new things that we can do, and ways to work with their body and not against it.
Do you, by the way, do you use any type of, because I see some people that use like IVs and stuff with rehydration or whatever. Is that, I'm not sure if that's a legal thing, by the way, but do people do that?
People do that, but that is illegal in USADA. So you can mask drug use with IVs. So yeah, it's kind of like it'll mask drug use.
Illegal with USADA and current UFC rules, because they have a departure from USADA, I think, right?
Yeah, they did depart from USADA.
But I still think they don't want people using IVs.
Right. Yeah. So if you know what you're doing, you don't need it. Like there's a lot of people who want to use IVs, and that's fine. But if you know what you're doing, you don't need it. Like I'm putting 20 plus pounds on guys in a day, and we're not using that. So you can use it if you want to, but it's when it became illegal, we stopped using it, and there was already information available to not even need it.
Gotcha.
When do you when should people incorporate like sauna and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I do it on like a hierarchy of stress. So what I want to do is to use the lowest stress response way to have an active weight loss technique. And we only use increasing stressors to the degree that we need them. So the lowest one is going to be put sweatpants and a sweater on and get in the bike. This is a very low impact thing. We're actually going to lose a lot of weight there. Okay, you've done 20 minutes on this bike. And then the next thing you're going to do is get in a hot bath. We do the hot bath, you're probably going to be on weight. We can pretty much stop right there. Between those two tactics, those are my two favorite. You do a little bit of bike work, and then you go into the bath. That is going from low stress to more stress. If we needed to do something else, that's when you would get into a sauna.
That'd be like almost right before weigh-in.
Right, exactly.
Right, that's what we're talking about. Like, several minutes before weigh-in, you're doing that because you want to dial that weight in just for that moment.
Yep.
And with some of what Andrew and Nsima do with jiu-jitsu, I think the weigh-in is it's not like the day before or anything like that, right? It's
day
like
of.
Day of, right? So in that scenario, what do you think you might suggest?
The day before or the day of?
When they have day of.
The
day of weigh-ins.
Day of weigh-in. So they weigh in and perform on the same day?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
A few hours apart, right? Maybe 4 hours or something like that?
Yeah.
Sometimes even less. Yeah.
Yeah, just say 2 hours, I guess.
Yeah. Same day weigh-in is more like a 3% offset from your weight. Like that's typically a good rule to have. 3% more than your weight. You can do that on same day competitions. If it's the next day, you can go like 10. This is something where it's a big spread and big difference, but
and
same day weigh-ins
is a sauna still appropriate, or what are your thoughts there?
I'm way bigger fan of the bath. The bath gets weight off people much more efficiently without the same kind of heat load on people. When people are getting dehydrated and they're exposed to that level of external heat, the stressors and the hormone response from that is higher than if you did a bath. So I am a big fan of stationary bike, but if it's same day, I probably don't want them to do like a workout activity and possibly deplete some fuel sources from that bike. So if it's same day, me personally, I would be using the bath that morning, weigh in, rehydrate, refuel, go compete.
And bath like hot tub or literally like bathroom bath at like however hot the water can get?
Same thing, both. Okay. Yeah. If you're at a hotel, you can go in the hot tub and just hang out there.
Like 104 degrees or something like that?
Yeah, about like 104. You do 5 to 10 minutes in the bath, get out, mummy wrap yourself to dry off and stay in there. And then after you dry off, get back in, pulling more water back out of there. That's typically the strategy. You're going to do like you would do, say 5 to 10 bath, 10 to 20 mummy wrap, repeat that cycle back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and your weight will come off very quickly.
Improving your sleep quality is as easy as shutting your mouth. And what I mean by that is putting some tape on, breathing through your nose, will increase your sleep quality. It's no longer just something that only the bros do. It's now been researched, and people understand that if you can breathe through your nose while you're asleep, you'll have better sleep quality and you will wake up more rested. Hostage tape is also really awesome because I know what I used to do. I used to use a little bit of a cheaper tape, and every time I'd wake up in the morning, the tape would be somewhere else on the bed or on my face, but it wouldn't be on my mouth anymore. But hostage tape, if you have a beard or if you don't, will stay comfortably on your mouth all through the night. And if you're someone who has a problem breathing through your nose, Hostage also has nose strips. So you can place those on your nose while you're asleep, or if you want to be like one of those hormozy guys, you can wear it during the day. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at hostagetape.com/power project, where you guys will receive an entire year's supply of mouth tape and the nose strips for less than $1 a night. Again, that's over at hostagetape.com/power project. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Along with that, for athletes that are currently weight cutting or they plan to do this, what are some things that they should try to keep on them? Because there are going to be some people that they take the very general idea of what you said and then they're feeling dizzy as fuck, or their stomachs feel like horrible, or they just have all these bodily things where they don't know how to fix the issue. Yeah. So what are some things they should think about and what should they keep on them?
Well, a little bit of fruit actually goes a long way. If you just have some blueberries or something like that, that's a good way to actually get something in your system that can have some electrolytes in it. That's not going to add a lot of any weight or glycogen to it. That gives you something to enjoy. That is also palatable when you're dry. If you have a dry mouth, having like a rice cake is just adding this dry thing to a dry mouth.
That's fucked.
And you're just, it's torture. But if you have blueberries, that already has some moisture to it. It's much better.
Okay.
So that is something that people can definitely have. A cold towel goes a long way too. So if you're in the hot tub, you can actually have a cold towel around your neck. Makes huge difference. You're just in the hot tub without the cold towel. The process is way more painful than if you have the cold towel on. You're going to lose the same weight regardless, but one keeps your head a lot cooler and kind of has this nice balancing effect to it. So that cold towel is huge. You can have the cold towel on your head during the mummy wrap too. Keeping it in both areas is a total game changer. When you're that in the weeds of your weight cut, that cold towel is like a hug from heaven. It is. So yeah, but I would say fruit and cold towel, those are the ones that you want to have. But if you do have like all of these other issues going on, you can have water and electrolytes nearby, but that means your weight cutting strategy was not designed appropriately. You shouldn't have those responses.
You see powerlifters with like Pedialyte all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Post weigh-in.
Post-weigh-in.
Yeah, that's when it should happen.
Okay.
If you're reaching for that during the cut, then your protocol was not designed appropriately, in my opinion.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about the rehydration process for maybe some of these guys that are doing 24-hour weigh-in? Is it like they start with liquid, then they move into food, or how does it work?
You want to start with liquid. I'll have my guys have 3 shakes within the first 60 minutes post weigh-in. So there's going to be this is where kind of a bit of the secret sauce comes in. You're going to have a certain amount of water mixed with a certain amount of carbs and protein. And then I'm also going to include glutamine, electrolytes, and creatine.
That Dan is actually shaking up for you. He did this for me at the Boston Marathon. He's like running around with shakes.
And it's just,
it was amazing. I was like, thank you, dude.
Yeah. And there's just trust. I'm like, drink this.
Yeah.
Like, okay. What is in there? Yeah. No, that was funny. Yeah. I was just in there being a chemist.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, so I'll have that. They'll have that shake immediately post weigh-in, and you drink it as fast as you want. You have that first one as fast as you want. But then the second one, I want you, you're going to have the same one again, but I'm going to remove the creatine. And then the second one, I want you to have it, but make it last until the 30-minute mark. So if you weighed in at 9, chug that first drink at 9. And then for your second one, you're going to make it last until 9:30. And then you're actually going to have that same one again from 9:30 to 10. So at that point, you've had 3 shakes within an hour. You are getting all of these things in the right spot, and it really brings you back to life. After that, I am a huge fan of high frequency, low volume meal patterns. So you're going to have a very small meal about once an hour. And that meal is going to be extremely well digestible for really 3 reasons. Number 1, it's going to be low fiber. Number 2, it's going to be low fat. And number 3, it's something you've eaten the entire fight camp. So it's going to agree with you. I mean, fat and fiber slow digestion down. And the goal right then and there isn't to get the health benefits of fat and fiber. The goal right there is to get you back to your training camp weight. So we're going to have high frequency, low volume meals about every hour. And a huge cue that I give my guys is you want to think about your stomach like a gas tank. And it should always be half full. So you don't want to be hungry, and you also don't want to be full. If you can just conceptualize your stomach as a half full gas tank and maintain that sweet spot, that's what's going to allow you to gain a lot of weight without gastrointestinal distress and without having diarrhea, which is actually a pretty big problem post weigh-in. And then in between those little meals, you can actually have some super light snacks if you want. Something like fruit, baby food is a really good option.
Wow.
Yeah, baby food is extremely well digestible and is just ground up food. It's a real trick that people can use, and in a low gastrointestinal way, get back to weight. So they're typically going to do that until they hit their training camp weight. Once they hit their training camp weight, we're still going to do that, but it doesn't have to be as frequent. Yeah. That's when you can kind of just listen to your body a little bit more. And we're going to do that really all the way up until you compete.
You said carbs in that drink, and I know we can't give all the secret sauce to it. But are you talking like a powdered, like mixed drink type of carb? Okay.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I'm just curious because a buddy of mine had a really awesome weight cut, made weight, won a championship. It was freaking amazing.
Yep.
When I recommended dextrose, and I'm like, hey, this is going to be the protocol. We're going to bring some carbs back in to give you some energy. It really bothered his stomach. The rest of his diet was on point. It was very low fiber. it was again more protein than anything.
Yep.
And then it was pretty high in fat, but it wasn't like quite time yet. But it was interesting that his stomach got super irritated to the point where like he's like, dude, I think I'm going to throw up during training today. And so it was wild because I'm like, why is this happening? And this isn't my world. I'm just doing my best from what I'm learning. And so I'm curious, like, what do you think happened there?
Did he have it all throughout his training camp?
No.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, we were about 2 weeks out. And so that's when we started mixing it in because he was depleted like a lot. So it's like, dude, we need to get you some energy.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
So you want to try it like post-workout and get used to it and so forth.
For sure. And I'll just tell you straight up, I use Vitargo. Vitargo is
Classic.
very, very well digestible. I love that product.
Tastes good too.
And its rate of gastric clearance is 2.5 times faster than dextrose. So you're going it's going to leave the stomach fast.
Which Vitargo are you using that tastes good?
I like it. It's like an orangey flavor, right?
Yeah. They do orange, grape, and fruit punch and mango. And mango and fruit punch is where it's at.
I've always liked it. You just have to shake it a lot, but I like it.
Yeah. I've been using that forever. I used to like not buy certain things in college just so I could afford Vitargo. Like, wait, because Vitargo's been around forever.
Yeah.
Actually, the first time Vitargo was ever in the U.S., it was because it was a part of Myoplex. Do you remember Myoplex?
Yeah.
Dude, it's a supplementation historian moment here. The first time it was ever in the States.
Something like that. Or
Is it like a cyclic dextrin or is it maltodextrin or what is it?
It's just it's a proprietary form of potato starch, and it's been around forever. It has the most scientific literature behind it, and it does a lot of really good things. Like I couldn't recommend it more, especially post weigh-in. So like my fighters will have that all throughout training camp because that's my preferred training fuel source as well. And then it already agrees with them, so that's what we're going to use after weigh-ins as well. And I also really like Vitargo for a reason that a lot of people don't think about. Vitargo does not contain any electrolytes, which gives me the freedom to have a customized electrolyte mix in that post weigh-in. So I'm not forced into a box in that situation. I'm able to inform or create an electrolyte protocol for that fighter for them. So there's more freedom in that regard as well.
But we were talking a little earlier, and we were saying how much your social media is blowing up. Now we were talking about how your social media like doesn't move the needle for you business wise, and that you get business by getting people results.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting because every time you work with somebody, your ass is on the line. Whether it's you're working with somebody for a movie, trying to create a new superhero, or trying to get someone a championship, or preparing somebody like you mentioned, the football player, and so forth. And I think that like fits your personality really well because that's what you love to do. You love to like research, and you love to. How many different types of athletes? How many different types of people have you worked with? Like you're working with UFC people, NFL. I don't know if you work with hockey and a bunch of other sports too, but
yeah, no, I've worked with athletes in 15 different professional sports. Yeah, I've coached Olympic gold medalists, 2 silver medalists, 2 bronze medalists. In that acting where I've coached 2 Marvel superheroes. So like these people, they don't find me because I posted on Instagram. I am integrated into that network. The 3 Super Bowl champions. John Rahm won the Masters golf tournament last year. Those people don't find me because I had a sick 60-second reel. That's just how it is. I actually left social media for 1.5 years, not long ago. I completely left it because I am a coach first and an educator second. So when I left social media, nothing changed from a business perspective. So working with pro athletes, still doing all those things because that's what I do. I actually only came back to social media because I had a daughter, and a lot of my family doesn't live close to me, and I wanted to share in my stories and in my posts. My daughter's named Hallie. She's 2 years old, and I knew that they would want to be a part of her progression and see how she's doing and those kinds of things. So I came back for that. And then I just organically started posting again because it's what I enjoy doing. But if anybody goes to my page, they're like, this guy is not after clickbait. Like what I post, I have my images are just studies that support my caption. And it's long form, it's context specific. I'm way more in like I would rather go an inch wide and a mile deep rather than a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm going to have that long form content to really smash something and post a research review within a caption. Back in the day, I read it somewhere and I can't remember who it was from, but they said that don't try to be popular, try to be a leader. That's how I've always kind of approached my social media, is not to try and gain a lot of clickbait, but to actually inform new knowledge. I want to have a net contribution to science and not just consume science. So there we go. That's my clickbait.
Is that Tonkat Ali?
Yeah. So most recent.
So what's the secret behind getting like picked up by the algorithm? Like, quit hiding it.
What secret? Exactly. I've got no secrets on social. Do
the opposite of Dan. You'll be sailing along well.
You'll be popular. But like, remember
everywhere.
last time we were talking about NASA and how the Department of Defense and those things that I was doing. They don't find me because I did a post. Like that stuff has never really informed my business. And it's who I want to be anyways. So
how do some people find you? Because it is interesting. Like, you work with O'Malley and then you work with the top golfer. It's like, you would think a golfer would want like a golf coach.
Right.
But what do you think it is that attracts people to you in the first place? And then when you start to communicate with them, do you just dive all in on golf and do you start to learn about these sports?
I've dived all into physiology. Working with athletes across 15 different pro sports does not mean that I can teach these athletes techniques within each of those sports. I know how to optimize physiology, and then you are able to point that physiology in the direction that you want to be optimized in. So that's always how I've approached this thing, and why I've been successful across many different sports is because I know what a high performance physiology needs to look like from an objective perspective.
So sleep for an MMA fighter, for a golfer, for an NFL athlete, it's still sleep.
Right.
And they all face very similar things in their lives, and even just your average person. Right.
Right. And like a big part of the way I approach coaching is through the theory of constraints. A physiology is only ever going to perform to the degree that it is constrained. So what I'm doing is you have this constraint and you will only ever perform to the degree that you are constrained. In the same way, like a CEO, he would look at his business because the business is only ever going to scale to the degree that it is constrained. So he's going to look down at his organizational chart. Is the constraint in marketing? Is the constraint in sales? Is the constraint in product quality? Is the constraint in culture in the company? He's going to identify the constraint and remove it so the business can scale to the next level. That's exactly how I view physiology. I am going to do your lab work. I am going to assess your lifestyle. I'm going to look at your life from the outside in, but then also look at your labs from the inside out. And I'm going to look down at the architecture and blueprint of who you are, identify the constraint, and remove it so that you can perform to the next level. If you're a golfer or a UFC fighter or an actor, I am going to find your problem and I'm going to remove it. And then you are going to have a higher performing physiology in the direction that you want to point it.
Dan, I'm curious. I want to know about this, and there's so many things we can talk about as far as the recovery and physiology of the athletes you work with. But when it comes to caffeine, it's a conversation that we've been having for a while now. I've been drinking coffee since I was like 19 or 20 years old, but I've been careful with my caffeine consumption, whether it's from coffee or from tea. I never have caffeine after 10 a.m. I usually only had like 1 cup of coffee per day. I didn't keep stimulants in any of my pre-workouts or anything like that. But one thing that I noticed for a long time, and I've talked with Mark about this, is that I've had low HRV numbers. And sometimes my highest HRV would maybe be 32 or 33. Oura Ring, Whoop, Apple Watch, 8 Sleep Mattress, all these things give me these shitty HRV numbers, even though I felt okay. About 6 weeks ago or 7 weeks ago, I decided to just stop drinking coffee. Not for HRV or anything, but just because I realized that it makes me feel too good.
Yeah.
Like I can wake up, I'm not motivated, I have a cup of coffee, super motivated. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So I stopped and I had a little bit of withdrawals for about a week. And then a little bit after that, all my HRV numbers start going right up. Like now I'm averaging around 40 or 50. And I never have seen those numbers in my HRV. My resting heart rate's lower. All these things are improved. And I wasn't even a big caffeine consumer. I would say I was the type of person who can drink caffeine before bed, even though I'd never do this, and go to sleep. You know what I mean? So I'm curious, what have you seen with caffeine consumption, negatives, positives? Maybe I just react to it differently than other people. It just doesn't sit with me, and I thought it always did. But what is it something that you notice when it comes to working with athletes and caffeine?
Okay, so first off, everybody's on the bell curve, right? So you can just be an outlier and have a weird response.
Yeah.
When it comes to caffeine or even magnesium, vitamin B1, you're gonna have people who have a weird bell curve response to anything. I used to work with a guy who works at XBT, and he couldn't even have magnesium upon waking because it would give him so much energy he couldn't sleep at night. It's like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And he just had such a weird bell curve response that I couldn't give him magnesium even upon waking.
Can I mention this too? I'm not the type of person that drinks caffeine or coffee and it's like it hits me all day. You know what I mean? Like I feel good, but it's not like I get jittery and shit. So that's again, it's just something
It almost like
odd.
is the absence of feeling bad,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would say with it too for me.
Yeah, you have adenosine that will build up throughout the day. It's basically a form of sleep drive. And then when you have caffeine, it lowers this adenosine. Yeah, and then you just create a more wakefulness. That is going to be physiology. You're going to have that response. Caffeine is going to do that kind of regardless of how you feel. That's why there's a difference between sleep length and sleep quality. If you have caffeine right before bed, you might still sleep, but the quality is not going to be the same because of the catecholamine response and the adenosine suppression that's going to take place. In terms of this, kind of an unpopular opinion, but the literature absolutely supports that people can have 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, and that can be safe and healthy in the long term. A lot of people are like, well, what about the glucose? What about this? What about? I would say, look at the research. Like, coffee has so many benefits. It's crazy. I did a full literature review recently on coffee being one of the best liver supplements anybody could ever take. And people talk about like milk thistle and like what that does. And we have so much research on coffee and what that can do, even in states of fatty liver, which is like wild. Like it's improving these states.
Caffeine specifically or coffee?
Coffee.
Interesting.
Yeah, coffee. In terms of like what I've seen caffeine do for athletes, it is a way to mask fatigue that you should be listening to. Like we talked about previously, like emotions being a signal and you should need to create action based on that signal. Fatigue is also a signal. So if you had some fatigue and then you needed liquid motivation in order to go do the thing that you're supposed to do, you are masking a recovery issue that is going to hurt your HRV over time. So yeah, I think that's probably a pretty common response, but if you felt no negatives coming off of it, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
On paper too, you can actually completely resensitize your body to caffeine after 11 days of no caffeine. If you abstain from caffeine for 11 days, you will go completely back to baseline to where like, remember the first time you ever had 100 milligrams and how good that felt? And then now, like, I need at least 400 upon waking on an empty stomach. That might ring the bell for me. But that first 100 milligrams, you felt amazing. You can have that again if you take 11 days off, and that's probably not a bad thing for people to do even once or twice a year.
Is that something you do, or you don't really care about?
Not right now.
I'm curious.
Building a blood work business right now. I need some caffeine in order to get the job done. I am Mr. Stimulants right now. Even when I showed up to Mark, I was like, hey, Mark, what's going on today? Do you want to do the podcast? We're going to go for a walk?
What you got for me? I wanted to ask you like about like building up the confidence early on when you were talking about like, I'm going to say yes to everything and I'll figure it out as I go. Yeah. That sounds terrifying because you're like, whatever X task is, yes. And then because I know I did something similar with this podcast. I asked Mark if I could take over and he's like, sure. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but we figured it out.
Yeah.
Moving forward though, it blows my mind to think that you kept doing that over and over and over. And I understand that once you get like a win, you're like, see, I knew I could do it. But then again, like you get faced with like, holy shit, I've never seen that one. I can do it. Like, where did that come from? And like initially, how did you was it kind of just like, I don't know, you're back against the wall and it's like, hey, I have to get through this or else I'm like going to starve today or something.
Yeah, it's probably two things. Like number one, I truly don't think people learn things like until they get their ass kicked. Like you're going to have someone who is going to drive like an asshole until they get in an accident. Then they're going to learn that lesson. You're going to get someone who's going to speed a lot until they get a brutal ticket and they're going to learn that lesson. I truly think that unless you are emotionally shocked into something, it's very difficult to learn lessons unless there is a price to pay for it. And a way to force myself to learn lessons and learn new things was to put myself in those situations that created that emotional value for me to go out and get something done and learn that new thing. So I was aware of that early, where if I continue to coast, I'm probably not going to learn anything. which kind of bleeds me right into my second point is, bro, I got bad grades in high school, and then I worked in a machine shop after that. And then the best things that have happened to me in my life are the worst things. Like your ability to pivot off of the worst things that have happened to you is your ability to seek the best things that will ever happen to you. And the best thing that ever happened to me was I got laid off from that machine shop. 50%, it wasn't doing well. 50% of the people in that machine shop got laid off. And I saw that as my second opportunity at life. And ever since then, I've been an absolute lunatic about all of this stuff. It's very motivating for me to never go back to a situation like that. Even like at this point in my career, it's impossible I'd ever go back. But it still motivates me all the time as I'm not going back. I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to do something that
you can't even go back. They fucking fired you.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want you back.
They're like, sure, you can.
You're like, I'm never coming back. They're like, good. We fucking got rid of you a long time ago.
Yeah, it basically taught me that you can fail at something you don't even want. You can fail at something that you don't even want. So you might as well go after something you do want. And I saw how much work it was going to take in order for a guy from a machine shop to move to a position where he's going to start teaching doctors about blood work, or move into a position where he's going to be involved in world championship fights. That is what I wanted. I wanted to be a leader, and I wanted to work with athletes, and I wanted to innovate. And I was coming out of a machine shop, and I was like, okay, I don't know what the step-by-step process is, but I know I'm going to need to start saying yes to a lot of things. And that's how that mindset informed me of you learn things when you're put in difficult situations. I know where I want to be, and I know my starting place, and I better start saying yes right now.
Dan is different, man. Like he'll do deep dive, like you never seen before. When I was working with you, I would mention certain coaches to you, like, what's their number? Who are you talking about? And you'd write it down, or you'd say like, oh, I bought like 4 of his books. I read them, and Brian McKenzie or Super Brain. You're like, oh, I did a consult with him. I've learned some stuff from him. And then you're telling me other people that you're consulting, and so I think it's awesome that you still have like a white belt mentality to keep learning and and you're not against, a lot of times you see with other coaches, they're worried like, oh man, like he's talking to this other guy too. Like they get intimidated or think that something's going to happen, and you're like more encouraging. You're like, no, this is actually good. Let me learn from this person. Let me see what they have to say. And it will probably help us even further as a team, as a squad.
For sure. That's something you have to do in athletics, because there's always a team. And your ability to join the team is going to depend upon your ability to be the puzzle piece that fits in there and doesn't try to be the whole puzzle. You got egomaniacs sometimes that want to be the guy for that person. I am the coach. I want to take the credit. Until you come across a fighter who has 5 coaches, or an NFL player who has 5 coaches. Like that's always going to happen, and you're going to hurt someone's progression more than help them. So that team integration mentality is forced in the world of professional athletics, because you're there to do your job and not try to take over. That's kind of number one. But number 2, I've always had that white belt mentality. But I call it the owl mentality, because if an owl, if an owl, when an owl eats a rodent, he actually eats the whole thing. So he's going to consume the entire mouse. And then what he does is afterwards, he's going to spit out the bones and fur. So he kept what was good. And
it's fucking gross. Owls are so weird.
I was thinking, oh, they look everywhere for information.
No,
they eat their prey.
Yeah. No, they keep the good and they discard the bad. He's gonna spit out the fur. He's gonna spit out the bones after. He kept only what he needed. And that's how I kind of approached everything, because I think you can learn a lot from people who do the carnivore diet. You can also learn a lot from vegans. You can also learn a lot from certain scientists. You can learn a lot from breath work. I think that your job is to like be the owl. You want to expose yourself to absolutely everything, and then keep what you need to make your job higher performing, and discard what you don't need.
That's some fucking heat.
Yeah, it is.
Be the owl. Whoa, dude.
Owls are kind of scary. I have a ton of them out where I live. It's horrifying, and especially because I got like my little tiny dog.
Oh yeah.
I always think like one of those owls is gonna pick up my dog.
Yeah, you ever see owls attack like big ass? It's like, they're scary.
Yeah. Scary looking motherfuckers.
As far as the going back to sleep real quick, Are there any general, because I know you deal with your athletes on an individual basis. You look at their blood work, their poop. You still look at their poop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Are there any general supplements that are good for like around bed that most people could probably have some benefit from?
General supplementation prior to bed. I mean, definitely magnesium. Magnesium.
Glycinate?
Glycinate is an option. You can have bisglycinate. If someone has gastrointestinal issues, then bisglycinate is the most GI friendly. So if you're someone who's prone to issues, bisglycinate is super easy on the system. Magnesium oxide is like a laxative, so it's the complete opposite. But also magnesium gluconate is a very well absorbable option. Magnesium citrate is the most absorbable option and the most researched and also the cheapest. So and lots of times that's like the one to go with. But also magnesium threonate. That's a version of magnesium that has some neuroprotective components to it and also has some inhibition components to it. We have a part of the circadian rhythm. We want to have excitatory activity happening earlier in the day. So things like cortisol, catecholamines, dopamine, these things are going to rise earlier in the day, and they should progressively reduce as the day goes on. Because before we had lights in rooms, we only had natural light. So as a biological adaptation to that, we needed to get our to-do list done while the light was still on. So we have excitatory things happening earlier in the day. They progressively decline until we have a natural increase in inhibitory things. So things like serotonin, melatonin, and GABA, these are going to increase more as the day goes on if you have a healthy circadian rhythm. Magnesium threonate informs and helps the GABA component of that. So it has a little bit of a better effect on anti-anxiety. And just from coaching, I've found that it helps people reduce nighttime planning. If you're one of these people who like plan the next day and you've got lists and things like that, and you want to think about what you're going to do the next day, that really helps reduce chatter, I guess I'll call it. And
Is there a gram amount?
Magnesium threonate, the most researched version of it is 2 grams of it.
Okay.
Which it provides not 2 grams of elemental magnesium, but 2 grams is the most, the totality research of what people could and should start with if they're not going to have it without lab work. Okay. So that's a good option to have. Also, lavender and passion fruit. People don't really talk about those, but in terms of quality scientific literature, those are phenomenal for reducing anxiety. And they're non-toxic. They're things that basically anybody can take, and it's not going to have this negative response for you. So,
do you want to say something about that real quick?
Yeah, I think it was lavender, right? That like kind of promoted something in regards to like what's the female hormone?
Estrogen.
Yes, it could kind of promote the production of estrogen in males.
In a very rare response. So the lavender has actually been connected to gynecomastia in certain outliers that way. So actually I've done a social media post on this before. But in terms of long-term safety and what people can do and how little of an occurrence that's going to be, I'd be very comfortable telling a very large audience that lavender is going to be fine for them.
Some lavender and tea ain't nothing.
Yeah, even small kids like a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Okay. There's also little sprays you can put in your pillow. The aroma is as well researched as orally consuming it.
Yeah.
So you can do either. But magnesium, passion flower, and lavender are all like super safe, broad recommendations you can make for everybody. But beyond that, I do like labs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because, again, 3-year-old and, my wife has a bunch of like essential oils and stuff. And there's like blends that will help you with sleep and anxiety, all that stuff. Yep. And I'm like, is there lavender in there? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, woof. I'm like, get that away from my kid. But that's just because, I'm like, better safe than sorry. Because I hear these things and I read these things. We've had people on the show kind of mention these things, but when I ask, I'm not getting like any super clear answers from people that I respect. Right. So that's why I've always just been more cautious than just like, better safe than sorry.
Being cautious is not a bad thing. And also nobody needs lavender to sleep. So it's not like you have a rate limiting requirement of lavender in a biochemical pathway. It's like lavender is used here to form melatonin. That is not required. So you don't need it at all. Yeah. But dude, in terms of long-term safety and research quality, it is a good option.
Yeah. So passion fruit extract, like a powder, and even lavender sprays, or
yeah, you can do lavender spray or consume it as well, just orally. There's a product called Trimag Supreme from Designs for Health. It's a Trimag Supreme Night. and it contains lavender and certain forms of magnesium. That's a nice little blend to have pre-bed that I use a bunch in my coaching.
Do you have to worry about magnesium 3 and 8 the way you would just like magnesium if you take too much of it, you're like peeing out of your butt? Like, do you have to be careful with how much you're taking with that?
I mean, you'd have to be careful with how you take anything. Too much of anything might result in peeing out of the butt. So, yeah, I think that you could probably say that regarding anything. But in terms of laxative qualities, it does not have those. Magnesium oxide is the real laxative one.
And you said 2 grams anyways. That's
very reasonable.
Got it.
Yeah, very, very reasonable.
Where did your obsession with blood work? Where did it begin?
The obsession with blood work kind of came from my white belt mentality. Like, I am not confident when it comes to this stuff. So something that helps build my confidence is objective data. If I can look at something and I know that I'm not just saying something, but I have numbers to work with that are objective, like blood work has a beautiful way of not giving a shit how you feel about the results. Like it's a murderer of bias from the person that I'm working with, but also from me. I had the self-awareness to know that I have a bias too. So blood work killed our biases. And then it allowed me to have objective metrics to work with and build protocols from in the absence of bias, which was very confidence building for me because my job is high stress, high reward. And in those situations, I want to work with real data and make real decisions. I didn't start with blood work, like in Gold's Gym, for example. I was molded into who I am now based on the situations I've been put in. It's like Michael Bisping, like a good example, right? He got a short notice. He's 2 weeks out from a title fight. And he calls me. He was on a film set in Toronto. And then he calls me from that film set, says he gets a title shot. Can you get me ready in 2 weeks? Yes, I'm your guy. Yeah, yeah. Right?
I told you to call me.
Yeah,
I'm your guy.
Yeah, right. So those forced me to be who I am today. I was forced into needing objective metrics based on how high pressure my situations are in. Because if I'm working with those, then I have a clear answer for everything I put in that protocol. I'm not just saying something. I have a clear answer for it. So that's kind of like number one. It was confidence building for me and my clients, and it removed bias. Number two is it's the best way that I can look at your whole, like we talked about previously, if I'm looking at an organizational chart and I'm trying to identify the constraint, like a stool analysis. We've talked about stool. A stool analysis is very valuable, but its value is quite localized within the gastrointestinal tract. Blood work is valuable to any organ system that requires a blood supply, which is all of them. This is why you get brain markers, heart markers, liver markers, kidney markers, gut markers, hormone, micronutrient. The blood is the communication and messaging system for the entire body. So you get a physiologic portrait, and that portrait, based on biomarkers, but also the relationships between the biomarkers, gave me such a beautiful way to have an objective reflection on the constraint that I needed to remove. I identify that constraint. I talk to my client to qualify that constraint, say based on a current symptom, and ensure that they do have that issue. Talking to them, listening to them is the art of coaching. Blood work was the science of coaching. And I combine those two. And blood work has allowed me to get the results that I get with people.
It seems to be like, blood work is like this crazy, like orchestrated symphony that's going on all at one time. And there's, certain levels going up, certain levels going down, various stresses that someone might have, various supplements someone might be utilizing, people's sleep, people's circadian rhythm, just kind of take every factor that is inputted into a human being, and it's going to impact their blood work. The blood work stuff is interesting to me because the science seems to be changing so much about it quite often, because it's still like relatively new. I don't know how long we've been really studying people's blood the way that we do now, because now, you can do at maybe endless amounts of testing on someone's blood, right? You can get so many different, you can test for so many different things. Have you ever looked at someone's blood and had it register, in your mind to be very unhealthy, and then to have the individual look like someone like this, look like Nsima before? Have you had situations like that? And what does blood work tell us, and what doesn't it tell us? Because seems to be really confusing, especially surrounding something like testosterone. You know, you'll see this person and he's got a beard and he's jacked and he looks amazing, and you're like, that guy's testosterone must be through the roof. You know, it's like must be 1,200 or something. But oftentimes that's not the case. So it seems to be confusing sometimes. What are some things that you've seen?
Well, in terms of what it tells us, it's a great way to have past, present, and future insights on somebody. So, like, for example, if you're looking at blood sugar, your hemoglobin A1C is a representation of the last 3 to 4 months of your blood sugar control. So our red blood cells, we have a 120-day turnover rate. So you can think 4 months from now, you're going to have new blood. So when we have these past metrics, it's based upon your past turnover rate. Hemoglobin A1C is actually like a marker for actual damage. If blood sugar hangs out with red blood cells too long, it creates glycated hemoglobin. Basically, you can think about like the sugar is damaging this hemoglobin molecule, and then it becomes what we call on paper hemoglobin A1C. So that damage only ever exists if blood sugar hangs out with red blood cells for too long. So this is why this is a chronic marker of your past 4 months. So I'm able to look at how you did blood sugar for the last 4 months. But then in present day, I'm able to look at fasting glucose. Fasting glucose lets me know what your blood sugar was that morning. And then in terms of the future, fasting glucose puts you as an independent marker for a lot of risk factors. So for every 1 point above 85 on a fasting glucose measure, you are at a 6% increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes over the course of the next decade. The reference range goes up to 100, by the way. It's about 70 to 100. So if you had a fasting glucose of 95, you're at a 60% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes over the course of the next decade. But you came back as normal, right? So this lets me see where you're going in the future. Also above 85, it becomes a cardiovascular death risk marker. So above, we are getting into cardiovascular risk, we are getting into type 2 diabetes risk. After 95, it actually becomes a neuropathy risk and actually retinopathy. So you ever see like someone with diabetes for a long period of time that might lose a toe or even a foot or something like that? So that can actually begin with macular damage after 95, even though you're still in the reference range. So I can look at like past, current, future issues and how the heck we're going to be able to deal with this. And that's just one example of all of the different organ systems we talked about that I can look at in blood work. So I'm designing protocols based on what I'm seeing here, based on what are the current constraints across the entire body. But you also have to take into consideration a handful of things in order to avoid like the confusion and noise with it all. Because blood work, if you're not good at blood work, you can chase false positives. You can do a protocol that you didn't need because that biomarker has natural variations. Just might have diurnal variations based on when you got your blood drawn that day, like testosterone does. Testosterone and white blood cells. If you do AM, PM measures, they can be completely different. So you can have a lot of false positives that you're chasing. So I lean heavily on patterns and relationships over single biomarkers. A biomarker will inform a recommendation, but a pattern will inform a protocol. So a biomarker is a single blood metric, and that will inform a recommendation. A pattern will inform a protocol. So if I see somebody has low testosterone, let's say that you're big jacked guy, right? Super jacked, big beard, Viking. He from the outside, the dude's an animal, and he's probably breathing really heavy into the microphone, which is the worst for headphones and podcasts. Listening to powerlifters and strongmen breathe into microphones for 3 hours. Exactly.
Imagine what sex is like for those guys.
Oh my God. Sweating.
That's some shit.
Yeah.
Not okay.
Sweating even though they're on their back. Still tired. Still tired too.
Red. Just red.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that's what we were talking about. Somebody's super jacked. I can see, I'm going to look, I'll say, okay, well, that guy's testosterone is actually pretty low, and his cortisol is high, and his sex hormone binding globulin is high, and his DHEA is starting to trend low. Okay, that is a very, very common pattern for someone who's under recovering / overtraining. So this guy, he can be super jacked, but his current physiology needs some changes in his program because he is entering that state of under recovery. So you get those things often too. If somebody is at an increased risk of stress fractures, they could have a lower vitamin D, increased alkaline phosphatase, and increased calcium. This is somebody who's going through a lot of bone catabolism. And I'm going to, like, this is something I'll see in endurance athletes a lot, is that they're at a huge risk of stress fractures because a lot of them don't eat a lot because they want to be very light in order to go longer. It's just kind of, I've just seen it a lot. So you have catabolism on top of catabolism, not eating a lot and then running for many miles every single day puts you at a massive increase for stress fractures. And that's a pattern you'll see for stress fractures. If you want to look at someone who is in a state of fatigue, fatigue is it's a symptom that has many different root causes. So like if somebody had low white blood cells and increased lymphocytes, that is a representation of viral load. So that would inform my protocol. Viral load, number one symptom of viral load is fatigue. So that would inform my protocol to move in that direction to remove that constraint. But if they had a sodium-potassium ratio, that ratio is actually an excellent reflection of adrenal health. If they had an offset sodium-potassium ratio, then that would inform my protocol to be involved in the removal of stressors throughout one's life. If they had glycemic variation, that's going to inform fatigue as well. That would actually go in that direction too, where I'm looking at patterns between C-peptide, insulin, glucose, HbA1c. These are all patterns that reflect a physiology. So like the most important thing to take away from this is a biomarker informs a recommendation, but a pattern informs a true protocol. And that's why the lab never provides the value. It's the interpretation of the lab that provides the value. If you can really master the science and art of interpretation, then you're able to create protocols that are truly life-changing and truly customized to that physiology.
So even with like other, like you now understand like all the ins and outs, obviously, but like if I get, really poor sleep, so the day before I trained my ass off, I ate really bad. I got terrible sleep. And then I wake up early and go get my labs done. Doc, my testosterone's super low. Look at the numbers. You have other metrics that can prove like, well, actually, it's maybe not as bad as you thought it was.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've categorized. I'm in the process of creating in my blood work algorithm so that I'm basically putting my brain into a computer so that you get the high value interpretation from a performance perspective. It's a big project I've been working on for the past year that's going to launch January 29th. And what you're able to kind of do is categorize high variability biomarkers, moderate variability biomarkers, and low variability biomarkers. So if a biomarker has a very low variability in terms of day-to-day change, then that is going to strengthen your confidence in designing a protocol based on that biomarker because it has a very low variability of ever changing. So when it has changed, it is representing a current constraint. So you're actually able to weigh decision-making based on high, moderate, and low. Testosterone has high variability. So what I would want in terms of protocol design for testosterone production is I would actually want more readings of that. You can create an average over time, and that's you're gonna learn much more about your body from multiple readings rather than just one. With that said, your one reading of low testosterone might actually be actionable if we did see the overtraining pattern in there, or if we did see micronutrient insufficiencies in there. If you have lower vitamin D, if you have lower magnesium, if you are in a physiologic state of overtraining, if I can see that you're sleeping poorly because of increased ferritin and low white blood cells and high C-reactive protein, then that is going to be the thing that's going to help your testosterone. So just because something's highly variable, it doesn't always mean that it's inactionable. You'll get a greater insight on it by creating averages over time. But if a pattern reflects the body's response within the same lab work, then that is actionable and you will increase your testosterone by creating a protocol based on the target that impacted that biomarker.
Pat Brock's Family on the podcast, we talk all the time about feeling good habits to make sure that your health is in check. And one of the things that's super important is getting your blood work done, because you could be getting great sleep, you could be having great nutrition, but under the hood, there could be things going on that you don't realize. So it's always good to get your blood work checked so you can totally understand what's going on. Now, the thing is also, when you get your blood work checked, there's so many different things and so many different numbers that it's hard to tell what's good, what's bad, and how do I optimize things. And that's where Merrick Health comes in, because they have patient care coordinators on staff that can help you interpret your blood work and then give you the necessary recommendations as far as supplementation, nutrition, and if you need it, hormone optimization that'll start moving you in the right direction. Andrew, how can they get their hands on it?
Yes, that's over at merrickhealth.com/power project. That's MAREK health.com/power project. At checkout, enter promo code Power Project to save 10% off the Power Project panel, the Power Project checkup panel, or any individual lab you select. Again, that's at merrickhealth.com/power project. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
As far as getting your blood work is concerned, because like Andrew just mentioned, all of these variables can affect the reading that somebody gets. What do you tell people to do when they plan on getting blood work done? Do you tell them, hey, I want you to take a little bit of time off training, 1 day or 2 days, or because you want to see consistently where everything is at, ideally, correct?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. I like people to come off all supplements 3 days before the blood draw.
Wow. All supplements.
All supplements. Yes. Everything. I want a full physiologic baseline. You come off of everything 3 days before your blood draw. And it's funny that people do get that response. It's like, I don't want to. I
like my creatine
for 3 days, man. I'm gonna shrink. What do you mean? But yeah,
caffeine as well too.
No, not caffeine.
Okay,
you can continue to have caffeine in the form of coffee. Because it's interesting. If you have coffee even the day of your blood draw, it's been shown to not show variations. I still don't recommend it, but it's actually one of the safe ones. But I like people to come off of all supplements 3 days prior to. I also like people to not train at all 3 days prior to, because if you're training, then you're just making the process harder. Is like you're going to come in, your C-reactive protein might be higher from inflammation, your creatine kinase might be higher from inflammation and muscle damage. You're going to have the intracellulars possibly leak into serum. So like if you have potassium at like a trending higher rate is going to be at like 4.8, whereas sodium is hanging around at like 145. And that's because sodium is extracellular, but potassium is intracellular. But if you're training and creating a lot of muscle damage and muscle breakdown, we're going to have intracellulars leak into the serum, and that's going to offset a proper electrolyte ratio. So then I'm not able to like correctly create your electrolyte protocol. I'm not totally insured all the time about, is your ALT high because you just trained and you got muscle, or is it high because something else is happening here? So it kind of, if I don't have a baseline to work with, because you're not removing supplements and you're not training, or you're not removing supplements and you're continuing to train prior to, it becomes more difficult to get a clean picture of what's happening.
Any adjustments to food on the day of?
Just fast.
Yeah. Like from the night, like, so for example, do you eat dinner the night before and then that's the last meal you have before your blood work the next day?
The most important thing is to try and create the timing the same. So like, cause some people can have, if you do, it says take your blood work fasted. Some people might fast for 12 hours, but some might be 16. It can be a huge variance there. Yeah. So one thing I like is if somebody has their last meal at dinner or 8 p.m., just do that again next time. You're removing as many variables as possible. So like insulin's a good example. Insulin's a pretty good hormone to see what's going on with blood sugar. But the problem with insulin is it has a very quick half-life. So it is there. It is going to find a home for the glucose from the most recent meal that you just ate. And then it is going to return back to baseline until your body detects an incoming glucose again. Insulin will do that, but has a very quick half-life. C-peptide is actually kind of a better marker for insulin than insulin itself, because if it is co-secreted with insulin. So if you secrete 1 unit of insulin, you will also secrete 1 unit of C-peptide with it. Yeah. But C-peptide has a longer half-life. So I'm actually able to get a little better insight on what glucose control was like previously that day than insulin itself, but you're still creating variance. If I had like pasta at 5 p.m. and then did a blood draw at 8 p.m. or 8 a.m., then it's going to be a lot different than if I had pasta at 5 p.m. again the day before, but then got my blood draw at like noon or something like that. Things with short half-lives become way different. So you want to fast that day, but you also want to eat at the same time the night before as well. So you're eliminating as many variables as possible.
But wouldn't so in trying to eliminate all the variables for an athlete, wouldn't that create an even bigger variable, because this athlete's used to training?
That's not normal for them.
Yeah, they're training every day. They take these supplements every day, and then they're getting tested after stopping everything that they normally do. and then getting right back on everything, the training schedule and the supplements. So wouldn't the readings, I mean, since they would be read differently, wouldn't that create different outcomes in the blood work?
Many people self-select supplements in order to eliminate the symptoms they currently feel. Yeah. So if somebody has a gut problem, they're going to take digestive enzymes or probiotics. That's going to throw off the results of your stool test because you're currently trying to mask your own symptoms. Same thing for caffeine, same thing for many of the supplements that we have. Like the reason why we feel good on certain supplements lots of times is because they're suppressing the symptoms associated with a root cause problem you haven't found yet because you're not creating a true baseline. The things that you're doing should always be informed by a true baseline because it allows your root cause problems to become more magnified. If you had an electrolyte problem, but you took electrolytes on the day of your blood draw, we're not going to be able to see that anymore. Then that's the reason why you need electrolytes so often. Okay, so this would be a good example of why we would need to do this. So the sodium potassium ratio I talked about just previously, I said it can be reflective of a root cause of fatigue. Here's how that works. Your sodium potassium ratio typically should be between 30 and 35. It's a reflection of adrenal health, okay? Now, you've got this range between 30 and 35, and it actually reflects cortisol. So when you secrete cortisol, which is a stress hormone, that is increased in response to stress, you will co-secrete something called mineral corticoids along with it. Mineral electrolytes, corticoids, hormones that regulate the electrolytes. So you're going to have this cortisol measure, you will co-secrete mineral corticoids with it. There is a hormone called aldosterone. And for the purpose of this conversation, aldosterone reabsorbs sodium from the kidneys. One of its jobs is to reabsorb sodium from the kidneys and excrete potassium so that you end up back in this level of homeostasis. That sodium's still good, let's reuse it, but we need to balance this out with the potassium as well. When you start to see sodium getting lower and potassium getting higher, that's the opposite. So that means there's been very low aldosterone secretion, which reflects very low cortisol output, which can reflect states of fatigue in people who are under recovering from exercise. This actually began in the medical literature. A lot of times you have to do that. You look at medical literature, and then it informs you on how you can create performance-based protocols from a different perspective, because Addison's disease and Cushing's disease are actual disease states of either hypercortisolism or hypocortisolism, either super low or super high. The beginning diagnostic process of identifying if someone has that issue is the sodium-potassium ratio. But just because you're not in a disease state, it doesn't mean that you are optimized. You can narrow in this sodium-potassium ratio, which is a reflection of adrenal health, which is a reflection of total stress load, which is a reflection of recovery status. Now, if we are to connect that to this electrolyte and supplement issue, if you have this problem of low aldosterone output and you take electrolytes on the same day of your blood draw, now I think your electrolytes are fine, but you need a totally different protocol, not for your electrolytes. The reason why, like I said previously, you're taking it to mask symptoms. Your electrolytes that you're taking, the reason why they feel so good is not because you needed electrolytes. It's because the hormones that regulate the electrolytes are currently your root cause problem. So I won't be able to detect why you need these electrolytes so much, which probably means you're cramping during exercise, which probably means your urine frequency is going to be offset. It might have some water retention. I'm not going to be able to explain that in a clear way because you're not showing me your clear root cause. But if you do, I will see aldosterone offset in that lab. I will create a protocol from it, and boom, you will be performing much better hormonally, but then also from a mineral perspective.
Couldn't we make the same argument then if you take 3 days off from training that would be unusual and that might be masked, like your cortisol, your estrogen, your testosterone, like those things might be altered greatly by not training at all?
They could be altered, and they probably would be altered, but that root cause problem is not going to be solved or eliminated in 3 days. It's a short enough time period to where I'm still going to be able to detect exactly what's going on, especially like in a true root cause state.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Short enough period to be informative, but not long enough to mask anything.
When it comes to, so I like this idea here because I think oftentimes supplements performance enhancing drugs and so on are kind of covering up maybe what's going on or what someone has. And we just see, and I harp on vitamin D just because it's such a popular thing for people to be consuming large dosages of. And I think they think that they're doing their immunity. I think they think they're doing their body some good. But I just really have a big question mark around it. I stopped taking vitamin D probably almost 2 years ago because I was like, I get plenty of sun. Like I don't, and then you and I, gone over blood work and we've had discussions about this before. But I guess the question that I'll pose to the audience and to you is if T3 is something that we know, like, you shouldn't be just haphazardly taking thyroid medication because it can alter your own thyroid. We say the same thing about growth hormone. Shouldn't be just haphazardly taking growth hormone because it can impact your body producing its own growth hormone. And we say the same thing with testosterone. Like we know these things. But then for some reason, vitamin D kind of slides underneath the radar, and I'm not quite sure why. What are some of your thoughts surrounding that?
It's a framework that surrounds all biomarkers. If something is high or low, it's a response to a current adaptation the body has. One of the most insightful questions anybody could ever ask themselves when looking at blood work is think, I wonder why that was a good idea. Like that, your biology created that response and adaptation based on millions of years of evolution. Okay, we will never be smarter than biology. Biology has answered questions that we don't even know were questions yet. So when you see something is high or low, you got to go, I wonder why the body thought that was a good idea. And that happens with every single biomarker. Like vitamin D is a good example because it is highly variable. Vitamin D is not just a representation of your vitamin D in like this clean format. Vitamin D is so deeply connected to glutathione and glutathione metabolism that it's been demonstrated in research many times over that supplementation of NAC alone linearly brings up vitamin D alongside it. So you didn't have low vitamin D because you had low vitamin D. You had low vitamin D because your glutathione metabolism was off. So increasing glutathione status linearly increased vitamin D along with it. Vitamin D is a negative acute phase reactant. That means in the presence of inflammation, vitamin D is suppressed. And even in that specific literature, it states right in the abstract, vitamin D is not an accurate marker for vitamin D. Due to it being literally vitamin D is not an accurate marker for vitamin D because of how sensitive it is to inflammation. Yeah. So that suppresses it. Vitamin D is involved in metal uptake. So it's been demonstrated as a host defense mechanism. Your body reduces vitamin D as a protective mechanism as to not uptake more lead. So if you're exposed to lead, say due to poor plumbing, your body will reduce vitamin D to reduce metal uptake of the toxic metal that you're currently exposed to. So then if you see low vitamin D in your blood work and your coach says, take 10,000 IU of vitamin D, your body's going, bro, I was trying to not uptake lead, and now you are forcing this thing to happen. The reverse happens with boron. You're exposed to a lot of boron. It actually artificially increases vitamin D. Air pollution has been demonstrated to suppress vitamin D. Like these things can continue to go on and on and on and on, to where you're going to come across somebody in Arizona or in California or in Florida who's exposed to sunlight every single day and has low vitamin D. And then the people's recipe book approach, well, if this was low, take this. If this was high, take this. They're looking at a biomarker and they're not looking at pattern or physiology, or they don't understand what impacts that biomarker. So if something is low or high, you do have to think, I wonder why the body thought that was a good idea. And you're able to actually go down a thought process that leads you to a root cause rather than just a symptom suppressor, which is, let me have 10,000 IU of vitamin D. And these examples like go on forever. Like albumin is another pretty good one. Albumin is just a protein in the body, and it does a lot of cool things, but it's brought up in states of chronic dehydration. So albumin has a life of about 20 days. So if albumin is high, that represents dehydration. But it is also a negative acute phase reactant. So it is reduced in the presence of inflammation. So if it's pulled up due to dehydration, but then pulled down due to inflammation, you're going to have an albumin that looks completely normal, even though it's not. You can be dehydrated and inflamed and have this normal albumin. If you look at the biomarker for the reading itself and not the iceberg underneath the water that informs how the biomarker came to be that day, then you are chasing false positives. You're not designing a protocol, and you're not doing blood work coaching properly. And I think the industry has completely messed up when it comes to vitamin D. I absolutely think that we'll look back on this and be like, dude, we were taking 5, 10, 20, 50,000 IU. Why? So not for B vitamins or vitamin C. We're just this one though. Everyone's just low in, and we're not questioning it.
Right.
Why? Just that logically, if somebody takes 5,000 IU of vitamin D and they have low, and the coach just goes, better go up to 10,000. Let's do that. More is better. Instead of asking why is that low. That happens in every single biomarker. Vitamin D is just one of the most popular ones that happens too.
Let's say that you are asked to you're tasked with this equation for, let's say, the UFC. Say the UFC decides, hey, you know what? These athletes are a little different, and it would be in our best interest to protect these athletes the best possible way. And therefore, we believe that these athletes should be able to utilize some HRT, some TRT, something along those lines. And because, I mean, there are guys that have low T, and some of it's associated with depression, some of it's associated with getting knocked out frequently, getting hit in the head, and so forth. So somebody decides that this is okay, and they task you with making sure everyone's healthy. How would you do that? And do you think in general, in sports in general, like this would be a good idea for not necessarily the performance enhancing side, but just for all sports to start to allocate that all of their athletes get tested for blood work?
I think that would be one of the best things that sports could do, is to have blood work and the UFC would make more money using my blood work, because more fighters would make it to fight day. The injury risk factors would be taken into consideration, so you're not going to have fighters pull out at the last second. My blood work would also detect overtraining, so you're not going to have fighters pull out for reasons like that as well. The blood work is also going to inform a more productive fight camp, so you're going to not just have a fighter who makes it to fight day, but performs better on fight day. So I think blood work is something that keeps athletes safer and keeps them performing better. So then the athletes get to feel better, but then the dudes at the top also get to make more money from more people making it to the actual event and performing better because of it. So I think that blood work is one of the most important things that anybody could ever do due to its objective ability to save the day. If somebody is going to, like, are you asking, if all athletes are going to go on TRT too? What would I do?
I don't know. Like if a sport just said like, I don't know, maybe it will get to that point because it will get so complicated with testing and trying to figure out whether people are on it or not, since there seems to be quite a bit of that going on anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if
let's just say that testosterone has been shown to like help with CTE, and they're like, this is the answer. Like,
fuck it, we're going to let it be. How would they let it be? And do you think it could be something that could be done safely, relatively safely?
Yeah, I think it definitely could be done relatively safely. TRT is safe and beneficial in a ton of ways. Like it helps. I did actually a research review recently on the neuroprotective effects and what it does to our brain. Testosterone does a lot of very positive things for our brain as well. Like a lot of people forget, testosterone was originally prescribed as an antidepressant. It's like one of its first prescription qualities about it was to make people feel better. And that's not just because you got bigger and stronger. It's because it actually has neurological effects to it too. So testosterone's powerful that way. 1 milligram per kilo is the typical starting dose for someone getting into TRT. But if you still have symptoms, then you'd move to 2 milligrams per kilo. And then that's kind of like the top amount of TRT one can take. If you go higher than that, then you're more like on more of a cycle, a low dose cycle, than you are actually on
Whoops, I
TRT.
miscalculated.
You don't understand. I'm really depressed.
Yeah, I'm still depressed, man.
I'm so depressed right now.
Come in like that mountain man we're talking about. Yeah, so like that is a typical dosing scheme. That is a neuroprotective effects one can have. I think it can be done safely, but it would be difficult to assess other performance-enhancing drug use because the masking component that could do. But then it would also, you're not informed on why it was low to begin with. That is a response. And if we take TRT without understanding the iceberg of knowledge that led to that end result, then we feel better, but we're not healthier. We just kind of feel better for it. We might be healthier, actually. Putting on muscle is going to improve glucose. We'll psychologically, there's going to be things that happen there. but the why as to why that was low will never be answered. So if someone can kind of continue their current life pattern without altering why testosterone was low in the first place. I think that that happens with a lot of things, even with vitamin D. Like is it vitamin D that gives you the benefits? Or is it the lifestyle that is associated with someone being outside and active and having a higher vitamin D? We're creating correlations with vitamin D, but it might be just being outside, doing other things. I think that the lifestyle associated with low testosterone is what needs to be worked on more than the testosterone itself.
Outside of testosterone, are there any supplements that are banned? And I know, again, you look at everything through the lens of blood work and what does the athlete need. But even with that being said, are there banned substances that you think, this is something that is safe enough? These athletes are putting themselves through the ringer. They're taking physical damage all the time. If they want to be able to have long careers, these would actually be beneficial for them to have. Is there anything like that on your mind?
DHEA is fantastic.
That's legal. It's not legal.
I don't think it's legal.
Okay.
I don't think it's legal in athletics, but it's legal for anybody else to just go buy. There are a lot of big rocks in health. I think that if people just did some simple things, they could have unbelievable benefits on their life.
Yes.
Like if you go outside and get 30 minutes of light exposure, if you go on a walk once a day, if you do some resistance training, doesn't even have to be a lot. I'm just talking about the average person. If you put your phone away after dinner, if you stop watching porn, these things it sounds just like 5 things. But they are associated with a myriad of benefits. Each one of those has dozens of benefits associated to it. Those would be considered like big rocks. Like you do these things and it's going to take care of a lot of stuff for you, mentally and physically. In the world of blood work, the cortisol to DHEA ratio is a big rock. That's like one of the big things I'm always looking at. Serum cortisol and DHEA sulfate. That ratio, when divided into each other, should be less than 0.09. It's kind of a weird number, but the data is what the data is. You want to be between 0 and 0.09 for your cortisol to DHA ratio. Once it exceeds that, you are now walking down a path that is associated to dozens of negative outcomes. There are mortality risk factors when it comes to the cortisol and DHA ratio. You're literally looking at the anabolic to catabolic equation, cortisol being systemically catabolic, DHEA being anabolic itself, but also being the precursor for other anabolic hormones like estrogen, androstenedione, and testosterone. So you're actually looking at the anabolic to catabolic ratio, which has been one of my things. Like I've said before, I don't think heart gainers exist. I just think that they don't have the biochemistry to support gaining. If you put calories and macros into a biochemically optimized physiology, for lack of a better phrase, you're going to get a very different protein synthetic response. It's like one of the reasons why drugs work. If you have 2 people who are biological twins and you put them on the same diet and training program, but one of them on gear, the one on gear is going to get way better results, not because his training and diet are different, because they're not, but because the response he's going to receive from that training and diet are different. He is going to get a higher anabolic and higher anti-catabolic response because of his chemistry and not just because of the macros and training. That happens on a natural level too. And that is the anabolic to catabolic equation between cortisol to DHEA. This equation is also reflective of inflammation. It's reflective of your immune system strength. It's reflective of injury risk. DHEA also protects your brain. DHEA, so it's been demonstrated that cortisol, when chronically high, actually creates oxidative damage directly to your hippocampus. So your hippocampus is your memory center of the brain. Cortisol damages the hippocampus, but not if DHEA is around. If you have enough DHEA, you can push cortisol as high as you want. This is a study was continuing to push this up. DHEA protects your brain from the negative effects of stress. So in combination with that, it's also the precursor for anabolism. So it is protecting your brain and your musculature in states of stress by improving that equation. So now you start thinking, okay, so if I have better inflammation control, if I have better immunology, if I'm protecting my brain, if I've got a precursor to testosterone, I've got a precursor to estrogen, androstenedione. If this is reflective anabolic to catabolic, if it's reflective of mortality risk, you start actually seeing the power of this ratio. So something I'm incredibly interested in right now, and something that's not being discussed, is the power of that ratio. That anabolic to catabolic equation and how that reflects stress versus resilience to stress is an enormous marker that people could use. And I think a lot of people are chronically stressed out. And since pregnenolone is the precursor to both cortisol and DHEA, if you are chronically stressed, well, stress, evolutionarily speaking, is at the top of the hierarchy. So if we use the same raw material for stress that we use to create the thing that's supposed to be resilient to stress, well, this raw material is always going to go to stress if we are chronically stressed. And that's what offsets this cortisol to DHEA ratio. So our job is essentially to remove the stressor that's creating the chronic stress. But in the meantime, you can also take DHEA to offset that. That's something I do a lot with my clients. And there's a ton of benefits associated to correcting that ratio. If you had a bad blood work and you only corrected that ratio, so one thing you focused on, it creates staggering effects system-wide.
This is wild, and there's a lot here. But I want to go back real quick to the top 5 habits you mentioned. Why did you mention porn in there? Because that just seems like the one thing that no one would really put into that habit that people should necessarily stop.
I think that people don't want to talk about it on podcasts. I think number one, but I don't care. That's something that I've said to clients a bunch because
really,
yeah, the addictive component to it, what it does to one's psychology, what it does to one's dopamine, what it does to one's attention span, what it does to one's relationships with the other people they have in their life. These things all contribute to one's total stress load. And when you are able to remove that, you are able to improve the relationships with your loved ones in your life, and you're able to correct dopamine, offset addictive behavior, and stop doing such a low ROI task. Like, Jesus, you can be in front of the computer for like an hour.
Yeah, or longer.
Or longer, right? And all the power to you. That's if somebody wants to do that, obviously it doesn't change my life in any way. So I'm not going to take a stance and die on this hill. Like, no, the point of this podcast is to not watch pornography. But in terms of improving your life as a whole and stop doing such a low ROI task, a zero ROI task, I think that belongs on the list.
You fucking loser.
Yeah.
You feel like a real loser when you're done, you know?
You do.
I'm ashamed.
It's fucking come in your palm. Why did I do it again?
Also, right when you're done, you're like, what the fuck is that? The fuck was I into that
Delete
for?
your search and everything. Throw the whole computer away.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Jesus, it's a search for more and more dopamine, so then no one's truthful about their search history.
Oh, hell
no, I was just watching normal stuff.
Like, I was starting to get a little weird.
Yeah.
So have you had any resistance from athletes in terms of that? Because I'm assuming that is something you try to work with the athletes on. But again, it's not, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's not something that I would have expected from you to actually tell athletes to do. I'd tell athletes to do it, but I feel like most guys are resistant to that.
Right. I have to tell my athletes, my job is to do my job. And that is a part of doing my job. And I feel like if I don't tell you things that are going to increase your performance and improve your life as a whole, then I can't rest my head on the pillow at night and know that I did everything I could to prepare that athlete on that day. So that's really just a part of the conversation is I'm doing my job and you are going to be better if you do X, Y, and Z. I believe it belongs high up on the list. And I think that it can mess up a lot of people too. Yeah. That's a rabbit hole you can go down. And you don't realize you're in a rabbit hole because you get that short, pleasurable hit. But in the long run, it's like an opiate, right? You get that warm, fuzzy feeling, but in the back door, it can ruin a lot of things.
The back door.
Warm and fuzzy and back door.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward. Let's say it's January 29th and your app is up and running. What does it look like for somebody? Let's say it's me. I have previous blood work.
Yep.
How do I input it? How does it get like uploaded, or how do I get the feedback and get the advantage from your app?
I get a blood panel for you. So I want you to get the maximum ROI from a blood panel. So I want to control the panel that you order. So you order the company is called Vitality. So you order my Vitality Athlete Panel, either male, or Vitality Athlete Panel, female. And you can get it, go to a local clinic and get your blood draw done. I'm also connected with mobile phlebotomists all over the country as well. So you don't even have to leave your house. You would just go online to vitalityblueprint.com, order your panel. Someone could show up to your door. You get your blood work done. Once that blood work is done, you don't have to do anything. those results are immediately sent to my software, and then my software immediately generates your report for you. And your report is going to include lifestyle, training, nutrition, and supplementation recommendations on that report. So you get a full holistic approach to what do we have in science-based performance blood work recommendations in a holistic manner for training, nutrition, supplementation, and lifestyle. You get that full report and program sent to you. You're graded on different areas of your body. So I'm actually looking at your blood. I'm giving you a totality of your entire blood work. It's called your vitality score. So it's going to be graded out of 100 based on your current level of optimization in blood work. But I'm also individually grading you on brain chemistry, hydration, injury resilience, micronutrient status, inflammation, gut health. I've got 13 different categories that I'm individually grading you on. And the combination of these is what informs the totality of your score. You're going to get all of this over time. My machine actually learns you better over time. So the more you do, the more those averages are going to inform it knowing you better. So when you use it more, it actually knows you better, and it's be able to create averages and more efficient protocol design for you. And that's like the biggest thing that's got me excited right now. Because in the world of blood work, nobody is doing it performance-based. A lot of people are doing it longevity-based. And what is longevity? Longevity is I've got a reference range, and I'm going to try and be in that reference range and hope I don't die. It's like I want to be in that reference range, and I hope things work out. Whereas performance, it's not you getting into a reference range. It's you feeling the effects of it. When you are feeling better, you go through performance-based blood work, you will have more energy. You will recover better. You will feel better psychologically and physiologically. As a byproduct of that, that is going to help with longevity. But in an acute performance right now, I optimize physiology, and you can point that physiology in the direction that you want to point it in. So when you have those constraints removed, you have an optimized physiology if you're a CEO, if you're an athlete, or if you're just the average person looking to do blood work. That's it's a huge passion project of mine, and I in large part believe it to be my life's work. I've been perfecting blood work interpretation and protocol design for 10 years, and this thing is coming out this year.
How much does it cost?
It's going to be dependent upon if you want to do once per year, semi-annual, or it's going to be quarterly as well. So you have different package options. My previous program, where I had all of those, very non-scalable, very expensive. This is the scalable version of that. That's going to be about $1,000.
Can you bring up the website, Andrew? Was it vitality.com? Is that what you said?
VitalityBlueprint.com.
VitalityBlueprint.com.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it might cost somebody about $1,000. Is that for the year, or?
Yeah, that's for the annual, and then you go up to semi-annual. It'll be a little bit more, and then if you do quarterly, it'll be a little bit more. But what you're getting based on your blood draw is 2 90-day protocols that are algorithmically broken out, so that you can optimize everything about your physiology.
What would it cost to kind of get started, I guess, is my question.
$1,000.
Okay, gotcha,
Yeah, you can come in and do a one-off and make sure that everything is appropriate for you. But a lot of people don't understand how good the human body is designed to feel.
Right,
So once you do this thing and you start feeling better, that's what the other packages are for.
Right. Awesome, man. Congratulations. That's I'm excited for you.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I wouldn't have got into the industry if I didn't think I could come into the industry and do something completely different that people haven't seen before. And it's ready, and I can't wait for people to get onto it.
Cool, man. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll have you on again, I'm sure, and we'll talk for another 3 hours or so.
Hell yeah, dude. Thanks for having me. It's always a blast here.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later.
And stop eating your meat.
Yeah, stop jerking off.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Dan Garner. We learned a lot, and we know you did too. And if you liked this one, you're going to dig this episode with Alan Belcher. He was recently the bare knuckle fighting heavyweight champ, and now he's moving back into MMA. We learned a lot about breathing, performance, high-level performance, and you're going to learn a lot from this one too. So click it. Enjoy it.